Hello guys, I wanted to show you a new modeling technique that I just learned recently. Uh, and what I'm working on is the media center for Dover. You can see it here in the picture. And move that off to the side. You can actually see the object in its current state. If I go over here to Edge Faces, you can see a little bit more of what's going on with the model itself. If you notice in the picture, right in this area and on my model, I'm missing a doorway. Now in the past, we would normally paint that doorway in a fashion that, a lot of the car painters are familiar with, which is, kind of guessing where it would be on that brick wall and just placing it, and then the scale might end up being wrong. It might be getting stretched out width-wise or height-wise, and you just kind of had to live with it because that's the way the model was. I found a more precise way to do it. I'm going to go over just a few things there. You can see that I've got actual polygons. If I go to Editable Poly here and turn on show selection there, you can see that I've got slices in that single polygon that actually show me where the garage door would be, where the window would be, and what you basically are going to want to do is go into your UVW editor, unwrap editor, and render a wireframe template off of this model after we do our slicing for where we want the door to be. Render that template and then paste that wireframe onto your texture, and then you have basically an outline of where that door is actually at and its actual size, and it won't be warped or missized or anything when you get done. So just for now, what I'm going to do is create a door right here. I'm creating this doorway right here. So what I want to do is create a box, and to get measurements, it's going to be 36 inches wide or 3 feet. Convert that to meters. Actually, let's undo that. So be that measurement there. And let's make it 7 feet tall. Get that measurement. So that, the end polygon right here is a standard doorway. So what I want to do is convert that to Editable Poly. I want to move that. I want to have it sticking through that face. What I'll do is I'll hit Z to zoom to extents there. I'll rotate around. And I'm just going to align that based on that picture right there. Looks like maybe just slightly this way. That's not bad right there. I can tell that this vent here needs to be moved over and shrunk just a little bit. That was painted with the old method of just putting it on there in the space that was available on the template or on the texture. And you can see that it actually ends up a little bit too big. That was the old way of doing it. I mean, this method you can get a lot more precise, and I'll go over if you're doing a very high polygon model and this is creating too many polygons. I'll go over how to fix that here in just a second. But what you would want to do is you would want to complete your model pretty much to the point where you're ready to start adding those types of details. So you're going to get your box modeling done and then create 2 copies of it. You might want to save it in another scene where this would be a single polygon on the side of that building. That would be a single polygon. What you're going to do is do all of your cutting exactly like I'm doing here, and then revert back to your other model that isn't cut, and the textures will still be in the same place as long as you haven't changed any of the UVW mapping. So that's a way to get all of this detail and still have a low polygon model to put into the game. There's a couple things I need to do. So I've got that in the right place on the y-axis. I'm going to move it out here. And I'm actually going to delete some of the polygons from that box. I'm going to delete the bottom and both ends. So I'm left with the upside down U shape there. I'm also going to do one other thing. Is I'm going to grab both bottom edges. And I'm just going to bring those down below that edge. I just want it to extend past that edge. So when it cuts fully all the way through the edge, not right to the edge. You might get unexpected results. So once that's done, we'll bring it back and intersect that wall where we want it to cut. I did not change the height, so that's still at 7 feet. The width is still at 3 feet or 36 inches, standard doorway stuff. I'm not going to get into exact measurements of how wide the trim on the outside of the door is. I'm more interested in the actual cutout. You can paint trim after you're done. You can, the garage door is already cut out on this model, so you could go back on that texture and stroke or outline that garage door to paint your trim and that kind of thing. For NASCAR 2003, that kind of detail isn't important. The game wouldn't be able to handle that. If you're building something for a first-person shooter or something, then yeah, obviously you would want that to be set in. You would want the actual trim pieces to be modeled and everything else. But for a trackside object for a racing game, that's not important. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure both of these are poly, which they already should be, but I'll just go ahead and do it anyways. Make sure. I want to take that polygon. Let's make sure that's the only polygon that I need. It's the only one being intersected there. If you're doing it for the first time, you would obviously select, it'd be a solid polygon like that. This one's already been cut up, so I just need to select that one. I'm going to detach to a separate object. I'm going to hide the original. So now the only thing that I'm looking at is that polygon that I want to cut and the polygon that I'm going to use, or the object that I'm going to use to cut that polygon. So I'm going to select the polygon that I want to cut, which is now a separate object. I'm going to go to Compound Objects, Boolean Cut. I'm going to go to Cut, Refine. I'm going to pick Operand B. And you can see that other object disappears and it leaves a perfect cutout of that door on that texture. Or on that object, or that polygon. So you'll notice that it's a Boolean object now, so I need to convert it back to poly. Unhide all, hide my ground plane. And you can see if I drag select, there's two objects selected. I have that one that I just cut and the main building. So I'll make sure both of those are selected. I'm going to go up here to the hammer, collapse, collapse selected. And now you can see that I have a perfect cutout. Go back to poly, it converts to mesh when you do that. I don't know, I prefer working in polygon. There's no rhyme or reason to that. But you can see that polygon has been cut and there's a poly for the door itself. There's also an outline for that door. That's what I'm after. That outline is 3 feet wide and 7 feet tall. You notice the garage door is 8 feet wide and 8 feet tall. That's a pretty much standard garage door size. So you can go by, standard construction knowledge. Is that door at Dover 7 feet tall? I don't know. Does it matter? Not really. So, what we're going to do is convert that to poly. Make sure it's, you know, fully collapsed when you do this next part. Unwrap. I go to the OpenUV editor. Bring it over here so you can see what I'm doing. Make sure your texture is selected. Now you can see that there's an outline of that doorway right there. You can see there's an outline for the garage door, an outline for the door we just created. And I know I need to adjust this now that I've seen where this door is. I'm not worried about that. So, how do I get this wire mesh or this outline into my texture? And I'll show you the texture in Photoshop here. How do I get that wire mesh in there? Well, I've already got one without that doorway. Hopefully you can see those blue outlines in the video there, but I'll probably pick a different color so you can see it easier. I might just use the green, might use yellow here. How do I get this information into Photoshop so I know exactly where to paint my door? Basically what you want to go to is Tools, and you want to go to Render UVW Template, which is the bottom on that tool menu. Hopefully that's showing up. And I want to set my texture size, which is very large. That's not going to be the final texture size, but I usually paint very large to begin with, and then I can adjust the size down afterwards. The colors of the lines are here. Let's pick something like yellow maybe. And what I will do is hit Render UV Template. And if you zoom in, the lines are actually there. Because it's so large, it's not actually displaying everything. But if you zoom in, they are all there. And let's see. Over here, that's my new doorway right there. So what I want to do is I want to save that as a PNG file, which I've already got one on there, but I'll just go ahead and overwrite that. So I want to use a .png file, and I'm going to overwrite it. I'm going to use 24-bit, 16.7 million colors, alpha channel enabled, and interlaced, and that will give you the transparency. So basically in that file you're not going to see the black, all you're going to see is the yellow lines. So I'll go ahead and close this. We'll just minimize this for now. So if I go over here to my desktop, and I know this is off camera, you can't see it, I'm just opening that wire.png. You're looking at a bunch of yellow lines on a transparent background, which is impossible to see. If I zoom in, you might be able to see it there a little bit. But it's there. So what I'm going to do is, in Photoshop, I'm going to hit Control A, which selects all. I'm going to hit Control C, which copies it. Now here's the important part of that. Make sure you're in your template, and make sure you're near the top. And I'm going to go Edit, Paste Special. I'm not going to paste. If I paste it, you know, hit Control P or whatever, or Control V. Is it Control V? Yeah. It may or may not line up correctly. So I'm actually going to delete that one. Depends on if you have basically wire lines near the edge. If you don't, if they're in the middle of the template, it'll paste it into one of the corners and not be aligned correctly. So if you go paste in place, then it will paste it exactly from where you copied it, keeping the center point exactly where it should be. So now if we zoom in, hopefully you can see where those yellow lines are. And we now have a perfect outline of that door where we want to be painted. So I've already painted the brown door. And bring it over here. Oops. Make sure you're on the right layer before you start moving things. And how I got that door was I just typed in Google door texture. I found this kind of a blue-gray door. It's pretty decent. Just did some Photoshop. I mean, that's basic stuff, changing the color of it. and that was done very quickly. Normally you'd want to cut out stuff that you don't want to change color of, but for right now I just want to show you how we get this in here. So I'm going to zoom in. Shrink that down. It's very similar to how you would paint on a car body in NASCAR 2003 with the wireframe. I mean, it helps. You guys are should be used to that if you're familiar with NASCAR 2003. And I'll stretch the bottom down there. So now we have a brown commercial door painted exactly where we want it. And you can see it's, not scaled correctly on the texture, so there is some stretching going on. If I painted this, the correct visual size, it would be incorrect on the model. It would actually be wider on the model. I want it, laying the textures out. There's probably a way to get that to where it's 1-to-1 and not squished on the texture or squished on the model. I haven't figured that stuff out yet. That's over my head. I'm just now figuring out this whole wireframe deal here, so same as painting a car, you want to make sure you turn your wireframe off. I'm going to save the PSD file, and then I'm going to flatten it and save it as the bitmap, and go back to my model, close the editor, and now you can see we have that brown door. And on the model itself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable this light here. Hopefully I can get a quick render out of it. And I'll turn edge faces off so you can see. That door is exactly 3 feet wide and 7 feet tall, which is accurate sizing. Even though the texture didn't look exactly correct, it really doesn't make any difference what the texture looks like as long as it's the right size on the model itself. That is completely backwards from the way it's been done for as long as I can remember. So let's see if we can get a quick render here. I'm not sure if it'll show up. Okay, good. So you can see everything looks sized correctly. The person fits under the doorway and things like that. This obviously needs to be resized because this was painted with the old method of making it look right on the texture, but it doesn't look right on the model, and that's opposite of the way it should be done. So I believe that pretty much covers it. Like I said, if you want to, if you're getting into an area of, let's see how many polygons this model is now. We're in 86, so we're fine on polygons. I don't know where it'll end up with all the different windows, and I've still got to do the planer beds and some of the stuff out front. This is, I've got to do some of the bushes. I've got to do the walkway on the roof. This might end up being 2 objects with as much stuff as I'm adding to it, or I might revert to a simple box model of the same thing, because I can delete all these individual polygons now and create one polygon and map it to the same area of the texture, and everything will still look exactly the same, but it'll be one polygon instead of, however many that is. 1 poly versus 7, so, well, excuse me, 8 polygons, so that's a pretty good reduction. Hopefully that helps you out. It's a new technique for me. Might be new for you too. So other than that, I hope it helps you, and enjoy. Have a good day. Thanks for watching. Bye.